Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending this session. My name is Dan Abbey. I'll be the moderator for this session. Um, as you saw from the title, we're kind of talking about a new age or a different way of doing business. And we wanted to make sure with the planning team that, we gave people opportunity to talk about some of their successes and how they've overcome some of the challenges that they may have experienced in their stewardship efforts over the years, and then even, if possible, more specifically, the current, maybe some current challenges they may have. But we put together a panel, and the panel is basically going to have, each panelist will have 10 minutes to talk about a specific challenge or way that they approached a challenging situation, and how it basically helped them accomplish the work that they'd like to see get done, for lack of a better term. And it's a really impressive panel. And just to give you an idea, we sort of have a diversity in the panelists, and the fact that we'll talk big picture, sort of how to approach things on a much broader perspective. And then as we move through the panelists, we'll talk about specific examples of how people approach a very specific issue on a given area, a given piece of land. So that's kind of how it's going to go through. And each panelist, as I said, has about 10 minutes, or does have 10 minutes. And if you have questions, we would love you to either put them in the chat or write them down on a piece of paper and save them, because we want to get through all the panelists. There's 5 of them. And then after all the panelists, we'll circle back with some of the questions that you've either put in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand when we get to questions, we can do that. So that's kind of how this is going to play out. I greatly appreciate everybody's willingness to be here and hear some of the discussion today. Excited about that. But I want to introduce real quick, and I'm just going to give their names and then their title. And as they come on, each one of the panelists will then introduce the next panelist. And again, if the panelists want to elaborate a little bit and maybe give a broader picture of who they are, a broader introduction, they're more than welcome to do that. So the panelists that we have with us today are Joelle, who's the Executive Director for the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance. And then following her will be Matt Lyons. He's the Executive Director of TREAD. And then following Matt would be Stephanie Weber, Executive Director of the San Juan Mountains Association. Followed by John Marinowski. He's the Partnership and Volunteer Coordinator for White Mountain National Forest. And then Louis, who is Snake River Program Manager on the Bridger Teton National Forest in Jackson. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Joelle.
Thanks so much, Dan. Hi, everyone. My name is Joelle Marier. I am the Executive Director of the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance, or NWSA, as you may hear us called. I am so happy to be back at the National Wilderness Skills Institute this year, and I am also so glad you are all here too. So welcome. I know some of you are already familiar with our work, but for those of you who aren't, NWSA is a national nonprofit organization focused on elevating the role of nonprofit partners and volunteers in wilderness stewardship. As an alliance, we represent, support, and connect a network of community-based member organizations and work to ensure they are well equipped to assist federal land management agencies in the ongoing care and stewardship of America's national wilderness preservation system. And you can see some of our partners that work here, getting youth into the outdoors, doing trail work, doing wilderness monitoring. Our partners are on the ground doing all kinds of work for the federal land management agencies in wilderness and trails across the country. So I'm here to kick things off for our panel today by providing a national level perspective that will hopefully flow through the projects and examples shared by our other panelists. So I think we all know that a lack of stewardship capacity on federal public lands is a problem, and this isn't a new one. The budgets and staff for the federal land management agencies tasked with stewarding wilderness have been stretched thin for years, especially when it comes to stewardship. Challenges like climate change impacts, increasing visitation, and changes in the drivers of recreational use have further grown these stewardship needs. And the most recent stresses on the federal side of the system are just another blow forcing us to refine our existing and hopefully develop new ways of caring for our nation's most protected landscapes. So I've been thinking a lot about Venn diagrams, and various versions of the one you see on the screen have really been helping me to visualize and think about how we might approach wilderness stewardship as a community, especially in this really challenging time for both our management agencies and the landscapes that we all care so much about. So in this diagram, you'll see that each element is equally important to the thing at the center, which is ensuring our public lands and wilderness areas are not just adequately stewarded, but also all they can to benefit the land, water, wildlife, communities, and economies that they so selflessly support every single day. So up on the left-hand side of the diagram, you see our federal land management agencies. That's the Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Forest Service, National Park Service, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So outside of their legislative mandate to manage our nation's wilderness areas, federal land management agencies are the experts on the policies and legislation that guide wilderness management. They are the ones who ensure accountability by developing the frameworks to assess and monitor both the preservation of wilderness character and wilderness stewardship. And they also are responsible for directing congressionally appropriated funds towards the preservation and stewardship of wilderness, and bring skilled teams of land management professionals who work at all levels to effectively manage our public lands. And I think we all know that our agencies are a very robust and necessary part of the stewardship system, but time and budgets have shown that they cannot do their work alone, especially as our stewardship needs continue to grow. So this is where we go down to the bottom of the diagram, our nonprofit partners and NGOs. This could be tribal entities, this could be non-governmental organizations. That's basically who I'm talking about today. Nonprofits are experts at community engagement and often local in nature. They bring deep local knowledge of the places they steward and the communities they serve. This different perspective is essential for federal land management managers to understand, but it isn't always easy for them to access on their own. So partnering with NGOs can really help them to tap into this knowledge. NGOs also tap into funding sources that aren't available to the agencies, and this really helps to amplify the impact of federal investments of time and money. I think this community engagement element is just absolutely essential for the future of wilderness and public lands because of its ability to both build a sense of ownership and pride in public lands, but also promote responsible recreation and foster a greater understanding of the role and mandates governing our federal land managers. And then finally, up on the right-hand side of the diagram, you will see NWSA, that's us. For our role, NWSA works as a liaison between a network of community-based stewardship organizations in all 4 of the federal land management agencies by helping these important parts of our stewardship system connect and work better together. This slide just shows some of the things we do, and ultimately our work is geared towards elevating nonprofit partners in public land stewardship. But one of the creative ways that we do this is through re-granting programs that we run in partnership with the Forest Service Wilderness and Trails programs. This strong partnership has led to some amazing accomplishments, both on the ground and across our community. To date, our programs have supported over 175 unique wilderness and trail stewardship organizations who have used this funding to maintain 11,000 miles of trails and complete stewardship activities in 180 wilderness areas. And some of these numbers are a little higher than what you see on the diagram because I updated them last night. So 180 wilderness areas is quite a lot. That's 40% of Forest Service wilderness areas and 22% of all areas in the National Wilderness Preservation System. So in total, the organizations engaged with these programs have deployed 35,000 volunteers and over 500,000 hours of on-the-ground stewardship for wilderness and trails. And then as an added highlight of our Trail Partners grant program, we engage both a review team and support projects that span the spectrum of national forest trail users, from non-motorized to motorized, from wilderness to the front country. And that effectively brings together the hiking, biking, equestrian, motorized, and wilderness communities around a common goal. This has been an amazing catalyst for partnering on other initiatives and is especially rewarding when these groups that might traditionally disagree can come together around good stewardship. Another benefit of these programs is they provide incredible leverage for federal funding, with an average 6-to-1 return on investment through volunteer engagement and other contributions like cash contributions from partners. So just to put that into perspective, a 6-to-1 ROI means that for every $1 spent by the federal government on these programs, they get at least $6 worth of work done. That's pretty awesome. But perhaps more importantly, these programs engage local communities in caring for their local wilderness areas and trails, the places in their backyards. And this builds local level capacity and expertise while cultivating wilderness and public land advocates now, but also into the future. And none of this would be possible without the close partnership between all three elements of the stewardship circle you see on the screen. So I'm going back to the diagram just to wrap things up. But in my mind, each piece of this diagram is needed to take good care of public lands and ensure future generations value them as much as, or hopefully more than, we do today. The panels of presenters you're going to hear from right now will bring you some of these stories as they share the creative ways they've worked across boundaries to address a wilderness stewardship need through things like community giving programs, creative volunteer recruitment, state and local government partnerships, and new conservation finance strategies. As we work through their presentations, I hope you keep the diagram in mind and maybe even develop your own version of it to help you as you work to address the challenges and embrace the opportunities ahead. With that, I'll pass along to Matt Lyons from TREAD to talk about the work his organization is doing in the Alpine Lakes region of North Central Washington. Thanks, everybody.
Everybody, thanks, Joelle. It's really humbling to be here. I'm not sure why I was invited. Honestly, this panel is pretty amazing to work with in this group, but I'm happy to be here and talk a little bit about what we do. My name is Matt Lyons. I'm the executive director of TREAD. We would be the bottom circle as an NGO, working with our local Forest Service entities in the middle of Washington State. So TREAD's hard to explain what we do and how we do it. We do a lot. Sometimes we talk about TREAD as a hub with spokes going out to different partners that are involved in outdoor recreation. Sometimes we talk about TREAD as an umbrella who's trying to have a 30,000-foot view over everything to make connections. But basically, we were formed back in 2019 from a community outreach project that the local community had a big survey and talking about all kinds of things like the needs of the community, from food to housing to whatever. And one of the things they identified was the fact that we are an outdoor recreation asset, and we have huge assets, and people are coming and tourists are coming, and those visitors are maybe over loving some of our places, and somebody needed to get everyone together and bring all those silos into one place to track progress and work together. So we do that with our acronym, with engagement, with advocacy, with development. We collaborate to build a sustainable recreation future in our area. We address growing pressures in the outdoor recreation industry. We serve as a central coordinating body, so we'll convene over 50 different municipalities, land managers, outdoor recreation groups quarterly. We track 78 projects right now, moving those along, finding obstacles, trying to blow up those obstacles, Sometimes that's funding, sometimes that's a policy change. And so that's pretty much what we do. We just try to be involved in anything that touches outdoor recreation. Okay, now look at that. Everybody go, oh, such a pretty picture. So we're talking about the enchantments, and we're talking about the Alpine Lakes Wilderness located in the North Cascades. The Alpine Lakes Wilderness sees hundreds of thousands of visitors every year. It has its own issues with that many visitors, from wildlife to soil erosion. We'll get into that a little bit. But basically, this place is kind of like a national park when it comes to visitation. And so Big W Wilderness is something that we're trying to protect. And the visitor use is causing a few problems. So here you are. There's the enchantments. And if you haven't been to the enchantments, they are beautiful. They are gorgeous. But you can see some of the impacts that all of this visitation is happening. We're seeing a huge loss in any kind of solitude experience in this wilderness with that many people. Vegetation depletion, wildlife habituation. We've got a picture of that coming up. It'll be exciting. And then the gross part, the human waste, and there's tens of thousands of pounds of human waste that need to be removed from this area because of the soil types and the lack of access to local or larger toilets, right? There's toilets out there, but we have to fly them out. There's all kinds of search and rescue happening in this area because people have pretty easy access to get to some of these places from Leavenworth, Washington, which is a Bavarian themed town. So it's that close proximity to a lot of tourists that is causing some of this impact. Okay, here's pictures. Now, while I'm talking about this slide, I want you to try to find the goat. There's a goat in one of these pictures. So to address this issue, you can see the hikers heading up Asgard Pass here, and they are just back to back to back because of Strava and people trying to do the through hike and get an extremely fast time. People will pass each other, creating new and braided trails, causing rocks to slide down this pass. It's kind of a safety issue because people just want to, break their own records or whatever that is. And then in the top right-hand corner, can you see the goat? There's a goat laying on that rock right behind the guy in the middle. That's how habituated these goats are. And now the baby goats are, wanting to follow you when you go to take a leak to get some of those minerals and causing some concerns with campers and things like that. So we have a decent problem in this Alpine Lakes Wilderness. And one of the things that happened was the Forest Service recognized that problem and has recognized it for a while and said, we want to form an Alpine Lakes collaborative. And we did that, and it lasted about 4.5 years, and it was every diverse stakeholder you can think of. But the problem with that was that it never went anywhere. That collaborative didn't really get anything done because we had so many diverse partners with so many unique needs, and the collaboration just wasn't there. Part of that is because different organizations had their own focus and wanted to not maybe compromise as much from their mission or efforts. And another big problem was the Forest Service, who actually took a huge step backwards to say, this is your collaborative. We're not going to tell you what to do. We'd like you to tell us what to do. And it caused some mistrust and some lack of leadership. And then it kind of fractioned. And then that's where we came in. We were a part of that collaborative and decided that if this is 4.5 years too long, and if this is too large and it's failing, what else can we do? So here comes the paradigm shift. So we looked for partners from the collaborative that had proven that they had a compromising mindset, or were at least willing to work together to find some kind of a compromise for this area. We started a smaller group. Then we worked with the Forest Service to determine, what could the Forest Service do with this smaller group. We focused only on the enchantments instead of the entire Alpine Lakes Wilderness. So we had a smaller footprint, smaller group, Forest Service working with us, and what could they do? At the same time, though, TRED had already started another project on behalf of the Forest Service to be called the Upper Wenatchee Valley Sustainable Trails Project. And what that project seeks to do is just outside of the wilderness. We were doing NEPA for 120,000 acres around the town of Leavenworth. We went right up to the wilderness boundary on one end of this, and we're going to do NEPA for 120,000 acres We identified about 60 miles of trails that were user created that have been used for 20 years that needed to become in the system so we could manage for them. There's road to trail conversion. There's 16 trailheads proposed. So just trying to get our hands on the recreation that's currently happening. And then that way, if we were going to do something with visitor use management for the wilderness, directly adjacent, we have these other opportunities that maybe we could push people towards closer to. So all these things are coming together. We formed a visitor use management team. We decided that the Forest Service was okay with managing what they could, but just outside the wilderness, our district ranger could make some decisions on the access points. So instead of trying to do NEPA in the wilderness, let's focus on what the Forest Service and the district can do for the access, because to access this area, it's really just one drainage. And so we can control that part outside the wilderness. We started the visitor use management team. We had groups from the old ALC. We had Forest Service leadership. It's ongoing right now. And we have a pilot project planned for next season to do some kind of timed entry, some kind of gate, maybe access points. We're going to focus on parking and just try to manage the things that we can control. We had letters signed and signatures from all kinds of nonprofits that were wanting to do this, as well as the cities, the chambers, the county commissioners, and of course the sheriff's department because of all the search and rescue and all the problems that are happening up there. There's a map. So that's our area that we're trying to do the NEPA for. That's the Upper Wenatchee Valley Sustainable Trails area. And just to the left on this slide, that's the Alpine Lakes Wilderness. You can see how approximate those two places are. So now that we have kind of a visitor use management idea and a pilot going forward, then as an NGO and a nonprofit, we're focused on how do we get other partners and other collaborators to help with this effort. So we started a One for the Outdoors program. It's just now being launched. It has 3 parts to it. We have at a local business, when you go to check out at the point of sale, it's a $1 roundup or a 1% that goes to a fund to help support this effort. As an individual, we've started a volunteer hub so that we can track all of the great efforts that other nonprofits and the Forest Service are doing and send volunteers to them. So we have a community calendar to send people to. And we also, of course, will take your donations. So that's kind of the 3 parts to that program. But I think what it leads to, and maybe what's most important about this is, TRED sees that the Forest Service is struggling with an issue. TRED sees some partners that are willing to cooperate, some partners that maybe aren't as willing. We can find other money, similar to what Joelle talked about earlier. So we can get really creative with funding and really creative with partners. And I think, now with the new administration and some of the changes that are happening to our federal government, now is the time, right? There needs to be more of a local response, and we need to form these new partnerships, and we need to maybe have a little bit more risk tolerance, or maybe working outside the box and paradigm shifting, with the title of this whole presentation. I think if you take anything away from this, lean into your nonprofits, your NGOs, lean into the partnerships that they can create. I think the main thing that I tell people is it takes so much time. You have to be willing to do this for the long haul. I mean, I've been through, I think now 6 different district rangers and maybe 7 different forest supervisors. So if we can be the consistent local piece, then as those federal workers are moving around or changing or taking new jobs, hopefully we can be that consistent piece and really just find really new and creative partnerships and funding so that we can get that work done that we all need to do. And that's taking care of our public lands. So thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. Hope this was a little bit valuable. And I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Weber now. Thank you.
All right, Matt, that was tremendous. Thank you. And I too am honored and humbled to be on this panel today. I think we all know that the value of our public lands is immeasurable, and so many of us care so deeply and passionately. And right now, it's one thing that unites a lot of us coming from different perspectives. So hanging on to that, supporting that, fostering that seems incredibly important, especially during these times. I am Stephanie. I'm Executive Director of San Juan Mountains Association. We are not in the islands. We are actually in Southwest Colorado. And we have served as the interpretive partner to the San Juan National Forest for the past 37 years, and that's included providing visitor information, stewardship, and conservation education. We've grown into our name over the past several years, and now are partners with every federal land management agency that has any jurisdiction over the San Juan Mountains. So that also, in addition to the San Juan National Forest, that includes the Rio Grande National Forest, GMUG, which is the easy name for the Grand Mesa, Uncompahgre, and Gunnison National Forests, as well as the Bureau of Land Management. All told, it's over 6 million acres of federal lands in Southwest Colorado, about a third of total public lands throughout the entire state of Colorado. Lot of space. It also includes the Weminuche, the South San Juan, the Hermosa, Lizardhead, Sneffels, and Uncompahgre wildernesses. Most of the wilderness work we do is centered in the Weminuche, which is Colorado's largest wilderness area. I'm not going to I didn't put it in my notes, but it's about 500,000 acres. Our work in the Weminuche and several of the others has really focused on education and outreach, helping with some of the wilderness solitude monitoring, logging out, doing some trail maintenance, packing out trash. It is a mix of seasonal staff. We've had wilderness crews working in and in partnership with our Forest Service partners for the past 5 years. It really began on the heels of COVID, as well as forest ambassadors who are working at working along the front country. This particular image is an area called Blue Lakes, which is in the Sneffels Wilderness. Listening to Matt, I'm like, this ain't so bad, but this would be a typical weekend in a somewhat hard to reach destination that'll see upwards of 1,000 visitors a day. So for us, that seems huge. This area is undergoing a visitor use management plan, and hopefully will be permitted this time next year. But it has been a work in progress. We have been working with our partners at GMUG to implement this and alert the public on what is happening. So this mix of seasonals as well as a lot of volunteers has really focused on helping our Forest Service partners and leveraging their efforts. The seasonal crews have worked diligently in an area that has been severely affected by drought and by beetle kill. There are instances, and I think one of my crew leads is actually sitting in the audience today. A couple years ago, they worked in an area where they were logging out about 200 trees in less than a mile of actual trail. And so what we encounter is just severe downfall on the heels of a winter or strong winds. And so it's kept them busy. We've also had a volunteer program that really has focused on helping with the wilderness solitude monitoring, as well as a somewhat unique program. The Weminuche contains an area called Chicago Basin. And Chicago Basin is not a huge area, but it is an easy access point for 3 of Colorado's 52 to 54 14ers, depending on how you count them. And so it sees a significant number of peak baggers during a very condensed season. It will garner up to 5,000 or 6,000 visitors in a single season. It's unique in that it is actually served by one of this region's most popular tourist destinations, the Durango Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. And so backpackers can eliminate a 10-mile hike by getting a train ticket and being dropped off 5 miles from this basin, which makes it unique in and of itself. And so we've had an ambassador program where volunteers commit to serving a 4-day weekend. They do get a free train ticket up to the destination. And we have up to 4 volunteers who will split their time. A pair will be at the wilderness boundary, and then 2 will go up to the basin itself. And their job is to help visitors understand wilderness regulations. This is an area where wildfires are absolutely prohibited. We're encouraging folks to pack out waste. And, in a very tight area, doing our best to maintain some semblance of wilderness character. And so that's been, first of all, a very popular task for volunteers. And second, one that is vital to just protecting this area to the best of our ability. Just as on the statistics, and I'll be brief, over the past several years, our wilderness crews have leveraged the work of our Forest Service partners by maintaining nearly 1,000 miles of trail, logging out more than 3,600 trees. And then they've been leveraged with the work of our volunteers with more than 6,000 hours of volunteer work, whether it's as a Chicago Basin ambassador or doing wilderness solitude monitoring. And, as we put dollar values on that, that's leveraging more than $200,000 in value over just a few seasons to assist and care for our wilderness. So that's all I've got for now. I look forward to any questions you all may have. And again, thank you for the opportunity. And I am now turning it over to John Marinowski.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Hello, everybody. I'm John Marinowski. I'm the Forest Partnership and Volunteer Coordinator on the White Mountain National Forest. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple programs, volunteer programs I put together. So a little bit about me. I've been on the White Mountain National Forest since 2004. And I've been in 3 different positions since I've been here. The longest position I held, I was the wilderness manager for the Pemigewasset wilderness area and the Sandwich Range wilderness. And I worked in that job for 15 years. It was one of those jobs that was very hard to leave. So I did it as long as I could. And then I'm like, well, I guess I need to promote maybe once or twice. So really enjoyed my time on the ground, and it's really helped carry these programs forward. And it's been a pleasure to help manage them. And my challenges have definitely changed over the years in terms of the volunteer programs and some of the issues that I'm faced with. But there's so much opportunity, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those challenges and opportunities along the way. So I've worked in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Our forest also extends into Maine. The unique thing about the White Mountain National Forest is it's very accessible. We see about 6 to 7 million visitors a year. We have people that can be here from Boston in a couple hours or less, from New York City in less than 6 hours. So, we have urban populations right out our back door. And obviously, listening to what other folks had to say, visitation is something we're all struggling with. This is a shot from, I believe, 2017 or so, where at this time, cars were allowed to park on one of our major highways, Highway 93, which basically comes up right through the White Mountain National Forest. So one of our one of the things that I was seeing as a young wilderness manager at the time was, people were coming up to the mountains and they kept coming and coming, and they really didn't know what they were getting into. We would have people show up with t-shirts and shorts and flip-flops, and so there was that kind of safety aspect that I was challenged with. And our partners, and how things work in New Hampshire is our partners at New Hampshire Fish and Game, they're responsible for the majority of search and rescue in the state. So I noticed, our partners were very taxed, and, they were going out and doing rescues, and, it takes 20 plus people to be on a rescue because you have to get the litter down and you have to take breaks. And, the more people you have on those, the better. So, we were averaging 200 search and rescue missions a year. And, one of my goals was to help our partners at New Hampshire Fish and Game out and, help reduce those search and rescues. And of course, the other goal, my primary goal, was to protect the resource. As more people came, there was more trampling, more overnight use, especially in our alpine zone, those areas above tree line, which we don't have as much as you all have out west, but we have some of the most extensive alpine areas in the Northeast. And those environments are very fragile. So like I was mentioning, our partners at Fish and Game were really struggling with maintaining their search and rescue efforts. They have quite a few volunteer groups that perform search and rescue, typically in the form of litter carryouts. But one of my goals was to really help prevent these sorts of things from happening. And I decided, initially to start just posting up at some of these trailheads. As a wilderness ranger at the time, I got to thinking, and I'm like, how can I help get the word out to as many people as possible? And most of my contacts traditionally were on the trail. Those one-on-one contacts when you're a ranger and you're talking to folks. But I thought to myself, well, hey, why don't I just post up at the trailhead, and I'll roll up in the back of my truck and throw out a few maps and talk to people. And pretty soon I was like, wow, this is really effective. I can talk to up to 100 plus people in a given 4-hour period. Maybe I should formalize this. So I decided to formalize this program and recruit volunteers to help staff some trailheads. So what started out as, me sitting in the back of a pickup truck with some maps, I really worked to formalize this program. And I did that on the White Mountain National Forest. We're very fortunate because we have lots of volunteers and partners. I consider us kind of a no recruit forest because people are always coming and knocking at our door, and oftentimes we have to turn people away because of capacity. But I worked to formalize the program, and we ordered pop-up tents, we ordered tables, and I started recruiting volunteers. And I recruited volunteers through our existing programs. So we have a great trail adopter program, and I put a letter out through that I was going to start a new program. And what started out as about 6 volunteers is now up to 120. This slide, you may be asking what SCAN is. It's part of a 5-step process that I've identified during our training, where we have volunteers scan the crowd initially when they're walking up to the trailhead, to look for things like people wearing jeans and flip-flops and things like that. So we traditionally have staffed 5 trailheads. A couple of years ago, we added a 6th trailhead more as a resource concern because we have some mineral sites on the forest that we're trying to protect. But this is a slide that I use in my training. The green arrows indicate, some of the trailheads that are easier to manage, to talk with people because there's less complexities. And the red trailheads, they may be busier, or the trail system in that area is very complex, like the Appalachia Trailhead there at the north, that has a spider web of trails. So unless you really know those trails, it might be difficult to start at that trailhead. So this is a little snapshot of, when I first started this program, I had volunteers who were willing to take some of our equipment out to the people that signed up to work the shifts. And after a while, we're like, well, if we have 5 trailheads, how are we going to manage running around and getting all this equipment to folks? So we were able to actually have the equipment stay on site. So if you can see where the table that's secured to the back of the kiosk, and then we have like that black truck box where we keep the pop-up canopy. We have some miscellaneous supplies in there, and then we have a map and like our Hike Safe 10 Essentials glued to the tables. So those stay on there, so we don't have to hold down maps with rocks and things like that. This is a quick stats of the program started pretty small at about 6 volunteers. Now we're at about 120. We staff 5 trailheads, and we staff from mid-May through mid-October, and we don't fill all our slots, and that's okay. But what we do is we have a sign-up system where people can sign up, and over the course of those 5 months, we have about 612 spots that are available, and we do pretty well. We fill about 50 to 60% of that. The thing we're really looking at is, and we average about 30,000 contacts with hikers throughout those 5 months. The things we're really looking at is, we want people to change plans based on their advice, our advice. So if people are wearing flip-flops, if they're not prepared, we're recording if they're going back to their car, if they're going to the store, if they're choosing a shorter hike. That's really our main focus, is to help prevent those search and rescues and to equip people with a little more information before they begin their hike. I'm fortunate in that we do have some nonprofit partners that were able to help me get off the ground. They helped me purchase those supplies that I was mentioning, like the tents and the tables and the truck boxes and that sort of thing. And we have New Hampshire Outdoor Council. They helped provide some of the T-shirts and things like that for our volunteer workforce. And on the back end, this is something that takes a lot of time, and administration is having a sign-up system. We use signup.com. We use Microsoft Forms for people to report after their shift. We use a Google Sites to have like a kind of like the Forest Service version of a SharePoint. And this program really wouldn't exist. We have a couple RV work camper sites at one of our campgrounds where I have 2 lead stewards who help me run the program. And the beauty of this program is I was able to kick off another program. People were asking me like, hey, John, I love standing at the trailhead, but I would love to hike too. So I'm like, well, I can start another program where people are out on the trail and picking up trash and cleaning up fire rings. So you can see in the photo that this is some of the work they did. So that's my time for the moment. I hope to take some questions later on, but thank you. I'd like to hand it over to Louis. Take it away.
Thanks, John. That was a really cool presentation, and love to see the powerful work that stewards and volunteers are doing on the ground. And I'm Louis Shahan. I'm the Snake River Program Manager on the Bridger Teton National Forest, where I deal with a lot of recreation and special uses. And my presentation is going to be kind of like a case study, 30,000-foot view of the implementation of our new fee program, with a lot of kind of uncertainty and paradigm shifts that have happened in the last couple of months and in the last year or so. In 1996, actually, on the Snake River, we were part of the fee demo program, and the local community really did not want to have anything to do with that. And some philanthropy led to the founding of the Snake River Fund, a nonprofit, and that kind of local philanthropy held us up for about 23 years. I took over in 2023 when we had just kind of rolled out our fee proposal, and now we're in 2025 implementing the program. We're about a month in. We started in May. So we faced two paradigm shifts in the in setting this program up, which kind of created some challenges and made me learn a lot on the way. So our internal shift of a big restructuring of the Forest Service and the agency, and this external shift of a new fee program for river users. So to deal with our external shift, we just decided we want to have a really solid implementation plan, starting with education and outreach to the public, which was done through the fee proposals. And as we moved forward, we wanted to get more press releases out, emphasize the funds that would be returning to the river program, about 95% of those funds, and then also put an emphasis on the value of public feedback, because at the end of the day, we serve the public as the Forest Service. An enforcement plan was going to be important, with kind of easing into things with a lot of education and friendly reminders in the first month or so, and then shifting to more serious compliance notifications in the second month, with still an opportunity to make good and pay. And then in the final month, or in the moving forward, we would shift to some citations if we had frequent offenders and things like that. We also wanted to get automated fee machines to make it easy for the end user. A little background: there's 3 ways to pay. It's $5 a vehicle. You can get a season pass if you go to the river a lot, and if you're going on an outfitter trip, you'll pay your fee through them, and that's for a special recreation area permit on the Snake River. So our first slew of unanticipated challenges in September, as some of you guys know from the Forest Service, we heard that we're not going to have any seasonals, and that's a huge thing for the forest and BLM people and the Park Service. Seasonals are the backbone of getting recreation work done on the forest, getting your bathrooms cleaned, talking to visitors. It was just a huge blow to us. Then we found out that the automatic fee machines provided through Ventec, which is our Forest Service contractor for those, were going to be over a year out. They needed requirements like cell signal and AC power, which we don't have at any of our sites. And then in 2025, we had the probationary employee debacles, where we thought we may be losing a bunch of probationary employees. Thankfully, they were able to come back, those who wanted to. We saw freezes to grants and agreements processes. We also saw new processes for public affairs, getting press releases out, getting information to local newspapers, things like that. And all of this led to some partner hesitancy. And I didn't mention before, but we do really lean pretty heavily on our partners here on the Bridger Teton National Forest. We're lucky to have a really good base of volunteers and NGOs to kind of pick from and to help us out. Here are some examples of our enforcement plan. So this is a fee instruction slip. We have a nice note. This is our first month of things. We leave these on every vehicle that doesn't have proof of payment. And then on the right there, you'll see what we'll move to as we get a little bit more serious, and then we'll be kind of documenting these, keeping track of who all is not paying their fee, and deciding kind of where the 3 or 2 strikes go before you get a citation. So to respond to the no seasonals, we leaned super hard on our partner groups, and through previous outfitter donations and local philanthropy, there was some money that we had that we were more or less saving for a rainy day fund or an emergency fund. And we were able to have the partner groups hire some folks to work and help down at the river. With our automatic fee machine issues, we decided that we'd have to shift to scan and pay, which was something that we weren't wanting to do, just because it's a little bit clunkier, requires some more smartphone connection to have an app. But that's what we're doing for the month of May until we get our fee machines. We were able to set up a fee collection agreement with one of our partners, and through that, they'll be collecting the on-the-ground fees, so they're not constrained by the same contracting requirements we have at the agency. So that was really smooth. But we had to deal with the grants and agreements being frozen and unfrozen, and requirements changing there on a weekly basis. So we really had to leverage our existing grants and agreements and use what agreements we had with partners to do the best things that they could do, and then spend money out of grants that were expiring to make sure that we had all the supplies to get things done. Dealing with public affairs approval processes, we just decided to focus on one of our strengths on the river program, which is our kind of on the ground communication. A lot of our rangers are really skilled at talking to folks on the ground. So we decided to hit the dirt, go to our sites, reach out to the local community, and just really emphasize on the ground communication and talking to folks where they're at. And as far as partner hesitancy goes, communicating with your partners, keeping your hopes up, and then doing your homework. So, going back and finding examples of a fee collection agreement on a different forest that was super successful, and then finding the contact information for the partner that worked and for the Forest Service personnel that was involved with that, and then connecting your partners with those people so they can hear from a different person besides yourself of, this is successful and it can be done. So my lessons learned, and this is really like the meat and potatoes of dealing with these paradigm shifts, and I think these were all really important for me. Acting fast when you can. So we had a number of agreements or grants actually that were expiring. And so last fall, I purchased a bunch of stuff out of those grants, made sure that we had the supplies we need so we could move forward this spring with getting things on the ground. Contingency planning was a huge benefit to me. So I would map out every circumstance. Okay, we have no seasonals next year. Let's say we get to hire seasonals. What does it look like? With the probationary employees getting fired, what's the plan going to be if it's just me and my lead ranger on the ground this summer? What happens if we don't get any fee machines for the next year? If you can kind of draw a roadmap for yourself, that was super helpful for me. Made me feel a little bit more comfortable as information was changing super rapidly. Knowing and engaging with your community is super important. I'm a big whitewater kayaker, so I've spent a lot of time just talking to folks, hearing out what they want to see, and also being in the loop on community events. I was able to go to our local kayak boat swap where I tabled and showed people how to purchase a season pass, how to get the scan and pay app on their phone, just kind of have those on the ground moments. And that really leads into showing your human side, because if people see you as a member of the community, as a member of, somebody who just really loves the resource, they're going to give you a little bit more leniency when they're facing something that they thought they were getting away with not having to have 30 years ago with the fee demo. Developing partnerships and relationships before you need them. Luckily, my predecessor had developed a lot of great nonprofit partnerships and systems to really support us in times of need. And then finally, I have 15 seconds left. I'll just skip through the last three, but learning as you go and paying attention to those things that you don't really want to learn about, like grants and agreements and all these little pieces. If you can show a little bit of interest with working with those folks, then they're going to recognize that, and I think that reciprocity comes full circle. And the last three are pretty self-explanatory. So I'll wrap up there, and thanks to all of the previous presenters.
Super. Thanks, Louis. Thanks, John, Stephanie, Matt, as well as Joelle. So I do see a question in the chat. Did you ever issue citations through LEO?
Yeah. So we're really fresh into this fee program. We just got boots on the ground and started it the beginning of May. We have had a few people that are not super psyched about it. We've had a little vandalism of some of our signs, things like that. We're not doing any citations for the first month. We're just leaving those slips that say, hi, our fee program started. It was kind of nice to be able to photocopy the handwritten note to kind of add that little personal touch and say, we realize that cell service is a big issue down here, so you might not have been able to pay. And then on the back side of that slip, we have a QR code so that they could pay after the fact. And we've had moderate success with that. I think probably once we have our electronic fee kiosks on the ground, we will move towards kind of developing like a 3-strike system. Let's say you get 3 of those warnings, you still have the option to pay and prove up. So there's an email address where you can show your proof of payment to a ranger on the ramp. And then if you don't have 3, we're working with our law enforcement officers to figure out, can we mail citations based on license plate information? And there is some possibility to do that. So we'll move towards a little bit more of the skull cracking, but hopefully after people have a little bit of time to kind of get comfortable with how to pay and how to display their fees.
Awesome. Thanks. What are ways your organizations ensure that partners and volunteers are only used in the supplemental capacity rather than as a primary means to carrying out public lands management? So, Matt, why don't you take the first stab at that? How are you trying to work with the Forest Service to make sure you're not replacing Forest Service employees?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we are literally struggling with that issue right now, right? In real time. So how do you as a local community see a need and capture that enthusiasm from volunteers or donors or whatever that is to support a Forest Service that's struggling right now without supplanting that effort and saying, you know, publicly or however we're saying it, that, oh, we didn't need the Forest Service, we could just do this on our own? It's not sustainable. I mean, so how do you balance that line? And I guess I do that through our partners. So making sure that as they're volunteering or as they're being trained to go out in the field and support the Forest Service, and they have those contacts with people out in the public lands, they're saying that same thing. Like, we're here to help, but man, this is really not sustainable. This is the issue. You know, we need to support our federal workforce. And if there's a better way, I would love to hear from other panelists on how they're doing it as well. But I think it's just spreading that message through the volunteers that are doing that work. And then they make those contacts in the field.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Hey, John, how about on White Mountain National Forest? How are you trying to make sure that your volunteers aren't replacing employees?
Yeah, great question. You know, I guess on the White Mountain National Forest, our volunteer programs have been long going. You know, we've had these programs in place for quite some time. The Trailhead Steward program I was mentioning, that started in 2014. When I created it, it was a supplementary thing. We have a great trail adopter program, and we've always had volunteer programs, and it's never been about replacing staff. We do ask some volunteers to do more administrative tasks, but yeah, I guess on the White Mountain National Forest, it's just never been about that. It's just been about people helping do the work on the ground. You know, that basic maintenance, that public contact. So it really hasn't been an issue for us. And we are, like Matt said, we are very sensitive about it. And we make sure people are aware when we have our big group trainings that, you know, this is a supplementary thing, and we really appreciate what you all are doing. And if you could let the public know when you talk to them, that's great.
Super. Thanks, John. Any of the other panelists want to chime in?
Sure, I'd love to. So with the San Juan, we work really closely with the wilderness staff that are part of the Forest Service in terms of where we need to be, what the messaging is, making sure that we're coordinating. And we emphasize both with our seasonal staff as well as our volunteers, hey, we're out there to educate. And, you know, if we run into situations where there is any conflict, to just, you know, report back to our Forest Service partners, but not try to deal with it real time. That we are there simply to leverage efforts, to assist, but we are not trying to take over. So for the most part, you know, obviously in a year like this, it gets a little harder because we don't have that many Forest Service staff to partner with, but the ones we do have are tremendous, are working their tails off, and we're in it together.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah, and this is Joelle. I might just chime in from the more of the broad brush perspective. I can speak for NWSA and say that all of our programs require our grantees to be partnering with agencies and have letters of support and really show that they're not just doing work on the forest, but working really closely with the agency staff there. So that in itself requires agency staff to be in place. But then, you know, just listening to the presenters, and especially like John, your program, that number of federal employees for a seasonal like program would never be possible. So I just don't see like that type of an effort really impacting the need for federal employees. But also, I think what I see is there, as you kind of look at it over time, there's pretty obviously jobs that are perfect for volunteers. And there's other jobs that really require that agency staff person, whether it's the uniform, whether it's a law enforcement officer, whether it's someone who's there all year doing the planning and then implementing it on the ground and understanding those policies and the legislation that's guiding the work, and understanding some of the more administrative things that maybe a volunteer or a partner organization might be not be savvy to. So I'm just sharing that as, maybe a national view of, I think that risk is there, but I also think there's jobs that are good for both sides of that coin. So thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Joelle. Hey, Louis, I'll let you respond to that as well, but then there is a question in the chat I'll follow up with you on.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just emphasize with our kind of leveraging or our partners to hire folks to help us out. That's a very temporary thing. So we're pretty much ran out of that money that was in that pot now because we had to hire so much staff. And luckily, the fee program should help bring in some funds for hiring seasonal employees. And I did read Vic's question in the chat. Hey Vic, it's good to see you on here. We've got some connections from the wilderness world way back when. So our funding source that kept the river fee free for so long was basically outfitter and guides, and they would donate about $1 per head on their trips, and that worked really well for a long time. Now we would see some private donations to the fund, and the Snake River Fund was stood up by a really big generous donation back in the 90s. But it really kind of evolved into this thing where just the outfitters were paying into that. And as we decided to implement the fees, it was simply because those funds from the outfitters, we would have new permittees come on. They weren't as involved with the program from back in the 90s. They were like, what's this and why am I giving up $1? They would sometimes see the light and donate, but it kind of like, it's not something that we as the Forest Service can enforce somebody to voluntarily donate money. It's actually like quite prohibited. So that was relying on the goodwill of them. And now this way they pay $3. Their clients pay $3 a trip. So now it's basically like, okay, you kind of have to send us that money, and it comes direct to us. Sometimes having the flexibility of working with an NGO with contracting, with getting work done like that when you have to turn around and do a boat ramp repair is way better. But through our fee program, we're hoping to kind of switch the routine of us getting money from our partners and switch to where maybe we can provide our partners with a little bit of funding so that they can assist us in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Louis. Hey, Matt, I don't know if you see the question in the chat, but there is a question from Corey. I would like to hear more about the founding of TREAD and getting folks from various interest groups to form a larger collaboration effort from the external NGO side. Do they still have their own interest groups and an interest group identity, i.e. mountain bike association, snowmobile club?
Yeah, absolutely. So when TREAD first formed, it was a volunteer board. We had no staff. I was on that board, and we decided that right then and there, we were going to form what we called ex officio membership instead of a direct membership. So what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to compete with those groups that already existed. So we didn't want to take the same or a different dollar from the same person who was already donating to the Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance or donating to a local land trust. Those are our partners we're trying to support. So that was a decision our board made right away. And what we did is we just asked everyone to come to a meeting, and we asked them, what did they want from us? We're going to start this new thing. What do you want? And we took all kinds of notes, facilitated discussions, sticky notes, the whole thing, and just collected all that information. So we had cities, municipalities, counties, chambers, and then we had all of the rec groups as well. So we had the mountain bikers, the snowmobilers, the hikers, the climbers, because we represent all rec. And that was kind of unique. I think that's where our success comes from, is because we want to be the hub for all. And sometimes when you're only this or only that, you get no's. When you're for all, it's easier to get a yes. And then we pulled in all of our land managers, state land managers, federal land managers, and we just said, what do you want? We tracked that, and then we said, who's not here? We had another one. And we said, this is what we heard last time, but now we have all these new people in the room. Let's do it again. And we tracked that. And then we gave them the results and said, we think this is what you want us to be. And then we just tried to be that. And we do that every year now. And so we meet with this group quarterly. And in the fourth quarter, we say, okay, here's what we tracked this year. Here's what we're thinking about tracking next year. What are we missing? And what do you want to see in the following year? And we just keep asking those questions and bringing them to the table.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. So Casey's asking a question to all the panelists or any of the panelists that want to respond. How do you all engage, recruit new partners and volunteers? Our forest has a lot of mountain biking, climbing, and OHV groups, but we cannot get their engagement to help with projects.
I'd love to take a crack at this first and invite anybody else, but SJMA's been around for a while, so we have a solid base of foundation of volunteers who've been working with us. I think our database has well over 700 folks. Obviously, making the experience worthwhile so that you get word of mouth helps to grow and sustain those volunteers. But one thing that we have started, the state of Colorado launched what we call a regional partnership initiative, and it is building these coalitions across the state. SJMA convenes one regional partnership, which has sounds a lot like what TRED has done in the past too. Some 42 different stakeholder groups, and they're coming from all angles: motorized, non-motorized, wildlife enthusiasts, etc. And this, just a few weeks ago, we actually held a volunteer fair, and we had 10 nonprofits tabling. It was a shot in the dark to just say, hey, we need volunteers out on our public lands. Come learn from an array of them as to what's available, how you can engage, what you're, in something that meets your skill sets. And our partners who participated said they've not had more engaging conversations ever. And so, while we started small, we started. And the intent is to host this annually just to give the community an idea of the full array of what can be done, how they can engage. And now is the time like never before. So.
Super. Thanks, Stephanie. Anybody else want to tie into that particular question? John.
Yeah, I'll take a quick crack. Stephanie, what you said really rings true to me. I was thinking about, having a centralized voice. A lot of times folks are asking how they can help, and if they're hearing different answers from different people, that can confuse them. So if your forest or the organization you work for, if you can centralize your voice and come up with a common way they can give back, start with what you have. If you have a small set of volunteers, maybe reach out to them and think about, how you can come up with a project. Or I often find that, do a personal ask is sometimes what people need. They want to help, but they don't necessarily know how they can help. So sometimes reaching out and just doing that personal ask. And if you have ways to sweeten the deal at all, if you have nonprofits or local partners that can help provide lunch afterwards, or donuts or t-shirts, things like that, that always helps a little bit, bring people to the trailhead, so to speak. So some of my thoughts. Thanks.
Awesome. Taylor had a question in the comment. I'll just read it real quick and anybody can chime in. In addition to what Louis just talked about relating to funding, conservation finance is one innovative way that is rising as a successful way to support and provide resources to management of recreation and other uses of public lands. Are there other new funding ideas that we could all cooperate in pursuing that you have been thinking about to support projects, stewardship, and management of public lands?
As part of our project, moving from an entire wilderness collaborative, that 4.5 years of work, we actually pursued with the Forest Service conservation finance work to go towards that effort. And as that effort was failing, a group of us decided, how can we work with conservation finance and all the avenues there? We actually reached out and got an IFNIF grant to support that work. Then we reached out to some local community members that maybe were in the tourism industry and we're using, those LTAC funds, those lodging tax funds that are generated through the counties and the cities, and educating them on this effort. They're coming here to spend money with you, but we need to keep that money local. And so we branched out. We branched out to some health organizations, because getting people outside and healthy mentally and physically, and just compiling all of those different funds together makes it so that pot of money can go further. We leverage that pot of money. It's kind of that return on investment. So I think there's all kinds of creative ways to do that. Our next steps are going to be maybe forming a council of governments and being more into that kind of dabbling into that realm. When we can find out where all the funding is coming from, bring it together, and then nimbly spend it locally instead of maybe a fee that goes back to the treasury somewhere, or something like that. I think that's the key to moving this project forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.
I'd love to just tack on too. And I don't, I will plead naivety to what's happening in other states, but a number of local governments have lodgers taxes across Colorado. And in a rural area like where we are, a lot of our revenue is derived by those lodgers taxes. And we're finding a shift in using that money predominantly for marketing to bring more people in, to helping to maintain and sustain, whether it's housing, childcare, et cetera. But the need for helping to maintain public lands and the infrastructure there, in my mind, has risen to the top. And I've been working with our local governments to start making that pitch of, hey, you know what? Our economy is driven by tourism to our public lands. This is a ready-made revenue source, and I'll report back on how successful we are, but we are getting some traction. So yeah.
Super. Thanks, Stephanie.